The shore lay quiet under soft morning light. Waves moved in steady rhythm. People passed by without notice. Kyle Rowan stood apart, shoes in hand, jacket folded over his arm. He had stepped outside the charity event for air, yet his breath stayed shallow. A young boy crouched near the water. Small hands pressed damp sand into shapes. The boy laughed when one shape collapsed and laughed harder as he rebuilt it. No fear, no hurry, full attention on joy. Kyle watched without knowing why his feet refused to move. The boy reminded him of something he never held. A life untouched by contracts or approval. A life shaped by presence. The boy stood and ran toward a woman waiting a few steps away. She knelt and brushed sand from his hair. Her touch stayed gentle, familiar, certain. Kyle's chest tightened before his mind caught up. Loss hit first, sharp and clean, not regret. Loss. He did not know the child. Yet something inside him recognized the cost. The woman turned. Time slowed. Her face carried strength rather than softness. Peace rather than effort. Saren, the life he once shared, stood before him, grounded and whole, with a child at her side. Kyle understood something then. Whatever this moment held, it had already been lived without him. The boy laughed again, louder this time, not for attention, not to be seen. The sound came easy, as if joy had never needed permission. Kyle felt it strike somewhere deep. A sudden weight pressed against his chest. His fingers curled at his side, slow and tight. He had signed deals worth billions without hesitation, yet this small moment stole his balance. The boy ran back to the sand. He knelt again, fully absorbed. He failed, smiled, tried again. No voice corrected him. No rules followed him. Someone had given him space to grow without fear. Kyle searched his own memory. Boardrooms, deadlines, raised voices, silence at home. He found no space like this, no room where laughter stood unguarded. Loss came before understanding. It felt clean and honest, not anger, not blame, a simple truth settling into place. He realized this child had mornings shaped by patience, evenings shaped by care, stories told without hurry, questions answered without dismissal. None of those hours included him. Kyle did not yet know who the boy was. No words had been spoken, no facts exchanged. Still, his body responded before his mind allowed it. Something essential had gone missing from his life, and it had grown anyway. Kyle stepped closer before he realized he had moved. His voice came low, careful. "Is he yours?" The woman straightened. Saren did not rush her answer. She looked at the boy, then back at Kyle. "Yes." The word landed without force. No edge, no blame. Yet it struck harder than any accusation. The boy looked up at Kyle. Curious eyes, calm face, no memory, no bond, no sense of loss. Kyle felt his knees weaken. He lowered himself without thinking, bringing his face closer to the child's level. The boy studied him as one studies a stranger at the shore. Then he turned away, back to his work. That moment carried the truth in full. This was the life that continued after she left. This was the future built without him. Saren's voice followed, steady and clear. "I waited," she said. "I asked. I gave space." Kyle swallowed. He knew the answer before she finished. "You chose her," Saren said. "And I chose to leave." No shouting followed, no raised tone. The choice stood plain between them. She had walked away after her husband chose his mother. And years later, he stood before the child he never raised. Kyle stayed still after her words settled. The ocean moved behind them, steady and unconcerned. People passed along the shore, unaware a life had just shifted. Saren rested a hand on her son's shoulder. The gesture held ease, shaped by years of habit. Protection lived in that small motion. Kyle understood something late but clear. Love alone had never been the issue. Courage had been. He had believed silence would keep peace. He had believed time would soften conflict. He had believed loyalty meant waiting rather than standing. In that space, a woman carried a future alone. In that space, a child learned to walk without his father. And now, standing there, Kyle faced the result of every moment he chose comfort over clarity. This is where the story asks you a question. If you were married and the person meant to protect you stayed quiet, would you stay? If loyalty demanded your voice and silence took its place, would you keep waiting? Many people mistake calm for safety. Many believe love survives without defense. Yet silence does not hold a family together. It teaches one person to endure and the other to disappear. Kyle did not lose his wife in anger. He lost her in a pause. And the cost stood in front of him, building sand shapes by the water, unaware of the choice that shaped his life. Welcome back to Mr. Austin's Love Stories. This channel shares stories about love, choice, and the quiet moments that decide futures. Stories where success does not excuse absence. Stories where dignity matters more than status. If you believe love requires courage, take a moment now and subscribe. These stories are for people who value growth, accountability, and truth. Kale stood on that shore, facing a life shaped by hesitation, not failure in business, not lack of effort. A failure to speak when protection was needed. Saren did not leave in anger. She left with clarity. She chose peace over pleading. She chose her child over waiting for a voice that stayed silent. This story is not about wealth. It is about responsibility. It asks a simple question with lasting weight. What happens when time removes choice? When chances pass quietly and life continues without permission, what remains for the one who waited too long? In the chapters ahead, you will see how love breaks, how dignity walks away, and how accountability begins long after comfort ends. Stay with this story. Listen closely. The answers come slowly, earned through action rather than promise. And when it ends, you may see your own choices more clearly than before. Saren Vale lived high above the city, wrapped in glass and quiet. From the penthouse windows, the skyline stretched wide, glowing at night like a promise that never slept. Every surface around her spoke of success. Polished floors, soft lighting, furniture chosen by designers who understood restraint and expense, yet none of it softened the weight she carried inside. Loneliness did not arrive loudly. It settled slowly, like a habit she never agreed to form. Each morning began the same. Kyle left early, dressed sharp, voice already tuned to meetings and forecasts. He kissed her cheek without pause, his mind halfway elsewhere. Saren watched him go, standing still long after the door closed, listening to silence reclaim the space. During the day, staff moved through the apartment with quiet efficiency. They greeted her kindly. They asked what she needed. She always said the same thing. Nothing. She spent hours alone, reading, walking, waiting for time to pass without purpose. Friends assumed she lived a dream. A powerful husband, endless comfort, invitations few ever received. Saren smiled through their praise. She learned how to nod without correcting them. Explaining felt pointless. How could she describe emptiness inside abundance without sounding ungrateful? At night, she prepared dinner she rarely shared. Plates cooled untouched while meetings ran long. When Kale arrived late, tired but alert, conversation stayed shallow. He spoke of growth and pressure. She listened, offering comfort where she could. When she spoke, her words stayed small, careful not to add weight to his day. She missed being seen, not admired, not praised, simply noticed. There were moments when loneliness pressed hardest, standing alone at formal events while Kyle moved through crowds with ease, watching him light up for strangers while his voice softened into distance at home. Applause followed him everywhere, yet none of it reached her. Saren learned to fill her days quietly. She volunteered. She cooked. She exercised. She maintained routines that gave shape to time. Yet even with structure, a hollow space remained. A marriage built around success left little room for shared presence. She did not accuse. She did not complain. She told herself this was a phase, that things would slow down, that love would surface once pressure eased. But pressure never eased. Luxury surrounded her, yet comfort stayed absent. Wealth solved problems she never had and ignored the one she lived with daily. She wanted partnership, not protection through provision. She wanted to be chosen in action, not in words whispered late at night. In that penthouse, Saren learned a quiet truth. Loneliness hurts more when no one expects it to exist. Kale Rowan moved through the world with certainty. In boardrooms, his presence shifted tone and pace. People listened when he spoke. Decisions formed around his voice. Screens lit up with figures that responded to his approval. He carried authority with ease, shaped by years of discipline and expectation. Outside the home, he stayed fully engaged. Articles praised his vision. Interviews framed him as steady and focused. Partners trusted him with futures tied to risk. Applause followed him through conferences and events. Power settled naturally on his shoulders. At home, something changed. The same man who commanded attention elsewhere grew distant within his own walls. His focus stayed divided. Calls interrupted meals. Messages pulled him away from conversations before they finished. Even in moments of rest, his mind remained active, locked on outcomes rather than presence. Sarah noticed the difference early. She watched how his voice carried strength in public and caution in private. He spoke boldly to rooms full of strangers, yet hesitated when emotions required clarity. At home, he chose calm over honesty, quiet over engagement. Kyle believed he was protecting peace. He avoided conflict with careful intention. He told himself tension belonged to business, not marriage. He convinced himself love required stability rather than confrontation. When Saren raised concerns, he softened his tone and offered reassurance without addressing the cause. "You matter," he said often. "You know I'm here." The words felt sincere. The action stayed thin. He missed changes in her mood. He failed to notice how her voice dulled over time. He did not see how often she paused before speaking, measuring whether her thoughts deserved space. Kyle provided generously. He arranged comfort with precision. He believed responsibility ended there. In his mind, absence caused by effort felt justified. Sacrifice took shape as long hours and long-term planning. Yet presence does not arrive through intention alone. At events, Saren stood beside him, smiling for cameras. He rested a hand at her back when required, yet his attention drifted quickly. She felt more like an extension of his image than a partner in his life. At night, he lay beside her, body present, mind distant. She spoke of small fears. He brushed them away with promises of time and ease. He did not realize those moments were requests, not complaints. Kyle never meant to neglect his marriage. He believed silence prevented damage. He believed love endured through patience. What he failed to understand was simple. Absence, repeated daily, shapes distance faster than conflict ever could. Publicly, Kyle built an empire through decisiveness. Privately, he allowed uncertainty to grow by avoiding choice. And in that space between power and presence, his marriage weakened without noise. Margot Rowan never needed sharp words to hold authority. Her influence moved with calm certainty, shaped by years of building alongside her late husband. She understood systems, leverage, and timing. People listened to her because results followed her guidance. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. Control lived in expectation. From the start, Margot studied Saren with quiet assessment. She asked polite questions and noted answers without reaction. She observed posture, speech, and restraint. Her judgments formed silently, then settled as decisions others followed. Margot valued lineage and structure. She believed stability came from order, not emotion. Love mattered, yet only when it aligned with long-term vision. She respected effort, discipline, and image. She had spent a lifetime protecting what she built and did not intend to loosen her grip. Saren felt the weight of Margot's presence early. Dinners carried careful pauses. Comments arrived wrapped in advice. Suggestions sounded optional but carried consequence. Nothing was demanded outright. Approval came through alignment. Margot never insulted Saren. She never dismissed her openly. She offered guidance on attire, speech, and timing. Each note arrived framed as care for the family name. Saren listened, eager to belong. She adjusted small things at first. A dress here, a tone there. Kyle noticed the tension but rarely stepped in. He trusted his mother's intent. He believed harmony required patience. When Saren looked to him for clarity, he offered a gentle smile and silence. Margot filled that silence with direction. Meetings happened without Saren. Plans formed without her presence. Decisions about family image and future unfolded in spaces she never entered. Margot believed she was protecting Kyle. She believed she was preserving strength. Saren sensed she stood on the edge of her own life. She belonged without belonging. She was welcomed without voice. Each adjustment earned brief ease, followed by new expectations. Margot did not see herself as unkind. She saw herself as necessary. She believed leadership meant stepping in when others hesitated. She believed Kyle needed guidance rather than challenge. She believed love survived best under control. What Margot never considered was the cost of exclusion. She did not recognize how quiet oversight eroded trust. She did not notice how Saren's warmth cooled under constant evaluation. Control does not require cruelty to cause harm. It works best when it appears reasonable. In that household, Margot's influence shaped rhythm and outcome. And in the absence of clear boundaries, her presence grew heavier while Saren's space grew smaller. Kyle learned early how to keep rooms calm. He watched his parents build success through careful alignment, not confrontation. Raised voices solved nothing. Control came from timing and restraint. Those lessons followed him into adulthood, shaping how he handled pressure. In business, avoidance looked like strategy. In marriage, it looked like absence. When tension surfaced between Saren and Margot, Kyle felt it immediately. He sensed the shift in tone during dinners. He noticed Saren grow quieter after conversations that once felt light. Yet when moments arrived that required clarity, he stepped back. He told himself stepping in would cause division. He believed speaking up would deepen conflict rather than resolve it. Peace, in his mind, required patience. When Saren mentioned feeling sidelined, Kyle reassured her without addressing cause. He promised balance would come. He promised time would smooth edges. His voice stayed calm, his posture relaxed. He believed calm signaled care, yet reassurance without action does not create safety. At gatherings, Margot guided conversations with ease. When comments crossed into personal territory, Kyle shifted topics rather than drawing lines. When Saren's discomfort showed, he offered a look meant to comfort rather than a word meant to protect. Kyle believed he stood between two people he loved. In truth, he stood nowhere. Conflict frightened him more than distance. He feared choosing would mean losing someone. He feared standing firm would change how others saw him. So he delayed. He waited. He trusted time to solve what courage avoided. Small moments revealed the pattern. Saren asking for clarity and receiving softness instead. Margot asserting direction and meeting no resistance. Kyle offering smiles where decisions belonged. Each pause trained the household how to move around him. Saren began to understand the rhythm. When she looked to Kyle for support, she found warmth without defense. When she needed a voice beside hers, she heard silence instead. Kyle never meant to hurt her. He believed love survived through endurance. He believed choosing peace required stepping back. What he did not understand was simple. Silence still communicates choice. By avoiding conflict, Kyle allowed others to decide his marriage's direction. His absence during key moments spoke louder than any argument could have. Over time, hesitation hardened into habit, and habit shaped outcome. In avoiding discomfort, Kyle created it. In choosing calm over courage, he taught Saren she stood alone. Saren did not change all at once. She adjusted in pieces. At first it felt reasonable. A different dress for family dinners, softer colors, longer sleeves. Margot spoke of image with calm authority, and Saren listened. She wanted ease. She wanted harmony. Small changes felt harmless. Then came her voice. Saren learned when to speak and when to hold back. She waited for pauses that never quite opened. When she shared thoughts, she trimmed them down, removing emotion, removing need. She learned to smile through discomfort and nod through dismissal. Each time she told herself it was temporary. She watched how Margot's approval arrived. It came after alignment, never before. Praise followed obedience. Ease followed silence. Saren adapted because she wanted belonging more than resistance. Kyle noticed her efforts and thanked her for patience. He told her she was strong. He told her things would settle. His reassurance felt kind, yet it carried an unspoken expectation. Endure a little longer. Saren endured. She folded her preferences into corners of herself she no longer visited. She stopped inviting friends Margot disliked. She altered routines to avoid comment. She prepared meals that suited others more than herself. None of this was demanded outright. It was learned through response. Approval became a currency she paid for with pieces of herself. Over time, Saren felt smaller inside her own life, not weaker, quieter. She measured every action for consequence. She questioned whether her needs mattered enough to voice. She loved Kale deeply. That love kept her trying longer than she should have. She believed marriage meant compromise. She believed patience proved commitment. What she did not see at first was the imbalance. Compromise moved in one direction. Patience asked her to absorb everything. Her silence became a requirement rather than a choice. In mirrors, she still recognized her face. Inside, she felt less certain. The woman who once spoke freely now rehearsed sentences in her head and discarded them before they reached her lips. She missed herself. The harm arrived quietly. No raised voices, no harsh words, just a slow reduction of space where she once stood fully. Saren did not lose herself overnight. She gave herself away in moments she believed would earn peace. What she did not know yet was this: approval gained through erasure never lasts. It only asks for more. And in shrinking herself to fit, Saren learned the cost of love without protection. Saren learned she was pregnant on a quiet morning. The city below her window moved as always, yet something inside her shifted with sudden clarity. She sat at the edge of the bed, hands steady, breath slow, letting the truth settle without rush. Joy came first, clean and bright. A life formed quietly, without permission from schedules or expectations. She pressed a hand to her stomach, smiling at the thought of something growing beyond control or plan. Fear followed soon after, not of the child, but of what the child would change. That evening, she waited for Kyle. Dinner cooled on the table. When he arrived, she did not lead with softness. She led with honesty. "I need to tell you something," she said. Kyle looked up, concern flashing before composure returned. He listened as she spoke. When the words landed, his face changed fully. Surprise gave way to wonder. He crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her close. For a moment, everything aligned. He laughed, low and full, lifting her slightly from the floor. He kissed her forehead and rested his palm against her back, grounding and warm. In that space, the future felt possible. "This is us," he said. Saren believed him. They sat together afterward, talking quietly. Kyle spoke of names and timing. He spoke of protection and legacy. His voice carried hope rather than calculation. Saren felt seen again, anchored by shared joy. In that room, the world narrowed to breath and closeness. Fear retreated, replaced by trust she wanted to believe in fully. A child felt like permanence, a bond that would steady what had wavered. Saren watched Kale carefully. He stayed present that night. His attention did not drift. His phone remained untouched. His touch stayed gentle, his questions sincere. For the first time in a long while, she felt chosen without condition. She slept easily, wrapped in certainty she had missed. What Saren did not know yet was how fragile moments become when joy enters spaces built on silence. She did not know how quickly warmth could cool once others joined the conversation. That night, love felt strong. Hope felt earned. Morning would change everything. In the days that followed, something softened between Saren and Kyle. Mornings slowed. Evenings stretched longer. He asked questions he once postponed. He listened without distraction. Their home felt lighter, filled with shared purpose rather than routine. Kyle began coming home earlier when he could. He noticed small changes. How Saren paused when standing. How her hand rested often at her stomach, protective without effort. He adjusted his pace to hers, walking slower, speaking quieter. They shared private rituals again. Late-night talks in the living room. Breakfast together before meetings pulled him away. Kyle spoke about wanting to be present, about shaping a different rhythm. Saren believed those words because they came with action. Touch returned with intention. Kyle's hand lingered at her back. He kissed her temple while passing. He checked in during the day, sending brief messages meant only for her. These moments carried warmth without audience. In those spaces, Saren allowed herself to hope. She pictured a home shaped by balance rather than hierarchy. She imagined Kale finding his voice when it mattered. A child felt like a bridge between who they were and who they could become. They spoke about boundaries without naming them. Kyle mentioned wanting his mother to respect their pace. He spoke of timing, of adjusting expectations. The words felt careful but genuine. Saren did not press. She did not ask for promises. She let herself rest in progress. At night they lay close, bodies aligned. Kyle spoke about legacy in ways that included her rather than defined around her. He spoke of partnership, of choice, of family shaped by care rather than control. These moments stayed private. No one else saw them. No one else influenced them. In that space, Saren felt protected. Yet warmth shared behind closed doors does not always survive open rooms. Saren sensed the balance was delicate. She noticed Kyle's posture change when calls from home went unanswered. She saw how tension crept back into his shoulders when family matters surfaced. Still, she believed love would hold. She trusted that joy would strengthen resolve, that a child would steady hesitation. For a brief time, the future felt possible, and because of that, the coming shift would hurt more than any open conflict ever could. Margot learned the news without visible reaction. Her face stayed composed. Her posture remained upright. She listened as Kyle spoke, hands folded, eyes steady. No interruption, no questions asked in the moment. When Kyle finished, silence settled briefly. Then Margot nodded once. "This changes many things," she said. Her tone carried neither warmth nor rejection. It carried assessment. She spoke of timing first, of projects in motion, of expectations already set. She reminded Kyle of upcoming negotiations, of travel planned months ahead. "A child," she said, "altered focus. Focus altered outcomes." Saren sat quietly beside Kyle, hands resting together, listening as if the conversation moved around her rather than including her. Margot shifted next to Image. She spoke of perception and stability, of narratives shaped by consistency. She spoke of how families at their level operated with order. Nothing rushed, nothing left exposed. "This family does not move without structure," she said. Control followed naturally. Margot suggested appointments, advisors, planning sessions. She spoke of doctors she trusted, schedules she preferred, people who understood discretion. Decisions formed smoothly, without pause. Each suggestion sounded reasonable. Each carried assumption. Saren waited for Kyle to slow the pace. She waited for him to ask what she wanted. He listened carefully, nodding, asking questions meant to refine rather than resist. Margot did not exclude Saren openly. She simply directed conversation away from her. She addressed Kyle when outlining plans. She referenced family policy rather than personal choice. Saren felt something tighten. Not fear yet. Awareness. This was no longer a private joy. It had entered a system. Margot never questioned Saren's character. She never criticized her directly. She framed every point around protection and preparation. Yet each word placed control further from Saren's hands. When Saren finally spoke, her voice stayed measured. "I would like to be involved," she said. Margot smiled politely. "Of course," she replied, then continued speaking without adjusting direction. Kyle did not interrupt. He believed harmony required patience. He believed agreement would arrive once details settled. Saren watched the pattern return. The warmth she shared with Kyle stayed intact, yet something else moved beneath it. Decisions now traveled faster than conversation. Plans formed without consent. Joy had not disappeared. It had become guarded. Saren realized this child changed stakes rather than softened them. And in Margot's calm response, she sensed control tightening, not easing. Changes followed quickly, dressed as efficiency. Saren noticed the shift in small ways first. Appointments appeared on Kyle's calendar before they reached hers. Names of specialists came up in conversation as if already agreed upon. Schedules were discussed in passing, framed as settled details rather than open plans. One afternoon, Kyle mentioned a consultation he had attended that morning. "I thought you said we'd go together," Saren said, keeping her tone even. "We will next time," he replied, distracted, already scrolling through messages. Next time became a phrase Saren heard often. Meetings took place during hours she worked. Advisors spoke to Kyle directly. Files moved across desks she never sat at. She learned about choices after they were shaped, not while they were forming. Margot coordinated with ease. She scheduled, confirmed, adjusted. Her efficiency impressed everyone involved. No one questioned her direction. No one paused to ask where Saren fit. When Saren raised concerns, responses came wrapped in reassurance. "This is temporary. It's easier this way. We're only planning." Planning, she realized, was power. One evening, Saren arrived home to find documents spread across the table. Kyle explained them quickly. Trust structures, timelines, conditions. His tone stayed calm, as if discussing routine matters. Saren listened, then asked quietly, "When were you going to ask what I thought?" Kyle looked surprised. "We'll talk about it," he said. "Nothing is final." Yet signatures waited. Decisions leaned forward. Saren felt her body react before her mind formed words. Her hands trembled slightly. She pressed them together, grounding herself. Something important was slipping beyond reach. Margot never appeared forceful. She framed every step as protection. Protection of family interests. Protection of Kyle's focus. Protection of stability. Yet protection came at the cost of Saren's voice. The child growing inside her became a subject discussed rather than a life she carried. Saren began to feel like an observer in her own future. She sat through conversations where her presence felt symbolic. Her role reduced to agreement after direction. Kyle believed he was managing pressure. He believed he was keeping peace between two women he loved. He did not see how exclusion deepened harm. Saren noticed how quickly systems close once activated, how hard it becomes to step back inside once left out. She did not accuse. She did not demand. She watched, listened, and learned. And in that learning, she felt certainty fade. Joy still lived there, but it no longer stood alone. It shared space with caution, with awareness, with the growing sense that something meant to protect her was beginning to cage her instead. Saren did not wake one morning afraid. Fear arrived gradually, shaped by pattern rather than event. At first, she dismissed the tightness in her chest as stress. Change always brought discomfort. She told herself this was adjustment, nothing more. Yet her body noticed what her mind tried to soften. She began to feel watched without being seen. Conversations shifted when she entered rooms. Plans paused, then resumed once she left. Kyle reassured her often, yet his actions stayed split between intention and habit. He promised involvement, yet systems moved faster than promises. Saren felt the child move and understood the weight of time. This was no longer about comfort. It was about safety, about voice, about agency. She started paying closer attention. Margot's tone stayed calm, yet her reach expanded. Advisors spoke with familiarity, as if decisions already belonged to them. Saren heard phrases repeated often: family interest, stability, protection. None included her name. Kyle grew quieter when tension rose. He listened more than he spoke. He delayed rather than decided. Saren recognized the pattern. The same one that had shaped her loneliness now shaped her fear. Late at night, she lay awake, hand resting over her stomach, listening to Kyle's breathing beside her. She loved him. That truth did not waver, yet love no longer felt like enough. She asked herself questions she once avoided. If conflict came, would he stand beside her? If lines needed drawing, would he draw them? If pressure increased, would he choose peace again? The answers did not come easily. Saren noticed how often her needs became secondary to smooth outcomes, how often her voice softened to avoid discomfort. She realized how quickly pregnancy shifted from blessing to leverage. This child changed the balance of power. And power, once activated, rarely loosens on its own. She remembered how she had shrunk herself before, how silence had asked her to endure. She recognized the familiar pull to adapt again. This time, the stakes felt heavier. Saren began to plan quietly. Not escape, awareness. She gathered information. She asked questions others did not expect. She paid attention to how decisions formed and who formed them. Fear did not push her into panic. It sharpened her clarity. Joy still lived inside her. She loved the life growing within her. She loved the idea of family shaped by care rather than control. Yet love now carried vigilance. She understood something important before any argument ever broke open. When warmth exists only in private and systems rule in public, danger does not announce itself. It arrives through omission, through delay, through silence that claims good intention. Saren did not yet know what she would choose. But she knew this. She would not allow her child to learn silence as survival. The conversation began without warning. No raised voices, no slammed doors. It unfolded in the living room, late evening, after a long day that left no one patient enough to pretend. Saren sat upright on the couch, hands folded together, shoulders steady. Kyle stood near the window, phone face down in his hand. Margot took the chair opposite Saren, posture composed, eyes focused. The air felt tight, not with anger, but with certainty that something had reached its limit. "We need clarity," Margot said. Her tone stayed calm, measured. This was not a request. Saren waited. She had learned patience well. Margot spoke about alignment, about preparation, about responsibility. She spoke of family expectation as if it were law rather than choice. Each sentence landed clean, practiced, supported by reason rather than feeling. Saren listened carefully. She did not interrupt. She noticed how Margot addressed Kyle directly, even when speaking about her body, her future, her child. Kyle remained quiet. His eyes shifted between the two women. His jaw tightened once, then relaxed. When Saren finally spoke, her voice stayed even. "I feel decisions are being made around me," she said. "Not with me." Margot nodded once, acknowledging the statement without yielding ground. "This situation requires structure," Margot replied. "Emotion cannot lead here." Saren felt something settle inside her. Not shock, recognition. She looked at Kyle, waiting for him to respond. He met her eyes briefly, then looked away. The room held still. Saren understood this was no longer about misunderstanding. This was about authority. She had hoped the child would shift priorities, that love would draw lines where silence once lived. Instead, pressure had sharpened control. The confrontation did not feel dramatic. It felt final. For the first time, Saren did not soften her words. "I need to know where I stand," she said. Margot folded her hands. Kyle stayed quiet. And in that quiet, the marriage stood exposed, balanced on a choice that had waited too long to be made. Margot did not rush. She never did. She reached for a folder resting beside her chair and placed it on the table with care, as if order itself required respect. "These are not demands," she said. "They are safeguards." She opened the folder and spoke through its contents without handing it over. Structures, timelines, oversight. Each item framed as protection rather than restriction. Each choice shaped to preserve control while sounding reasonable. She spoke of trusts to manage assets connected to the child, of travel limits during critical months, of medical decisions routed through advisors she trusted. She spoke of privacy clauses meant to guard reputation. Saren listened, heart steady, mind sharp. None of the conditions asked what she wanted. Margot explained how family expectations required alignment, how deviation risked instability, how preparation ensured security for everyone involved. "This family plans," Margot said. "Nothing happens without agreement." Saren noticed the word choice. Agreement implied consent, yet consent had not been invited. Kyle shifted slightly. He glanced at the folder, then at Saren. His mouth opened once, then closed. He said nothing. Margot continued, unfazed. She spoke of temporary measures, of future review, of flexibility once things settled. The tone suggested generosity, yet the structure allowed none. Saren felt a calm clarity rise within her. These were not discussions, they were terms. She asked one question, "And if I don't agree?" Margot met her gaze evenly. "Then this becomes difficult." No threat followed, none was needed. Difficulty sat undefined, wide enough to hold consequence. Saren turned to Kyle. This time she did not soften her look. She did not search his face for reassurance. She looked for resolve. His silence stretched. Margot closed the folder. "We need unity," she said. "Especially now." Saren understood something in that moment. Unity here did not mean partnership. It meant compliance. Conditions framed as care still bind. Protection offered without voice still removes choice. The room felt smaller, not from tension, but from realization. This was the future being offered. Structured, controlled, decided. Saren waited for Kale to speak. He did not. Saren turned fully toward Kale. Not with anger, not with tears. With clarity she had earned over time. "Say something," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not tremble. The words carried weight because she had carried silence long enough. Kyle looked at her. For a moment he seemed present, as if he might finally step forward. His brows drew together. His hand tightened around the phone he still held, forgotten. He took a breath. Saren waited. This was not a request for comfort. It was a request for position. She needed to know where he stood when choice demanded cost. She needed to hear whether love would move beyond reassurance into defense. Margot remained still, eyes on Kyle now. She did not interrupt. She did not need to. The moment belonged to him. Saren spoke again, slower. "I need to know if you agree with this," she said. "If this is what you want." She gestured lightly toward the folder. Not accusing, not pleading, naming reality. Kyle's mouth opened, closed. He rubbed his thumb against the edge of his phone, a small habit Saren had seen before during difficult negotiations. "This is complicated," he said at last. The word landed heavy. Saren felt it then. Not disappointment. Confirmation. She stepped closer, standing directly in front of him. "It's not," she said. "It's clear." She waited for him to correct her, to draw a line, to say her voice mattered as much as process, to say their child changed the rules. Kyle looked away. He spoke about balance, about timing, about not wanting to cause division. He spoke carefully, choosing words meant to soothe rather than decide. Saren listened, her face still, her hands steady. She did not interrupt. She let him finish. When he stopped speaking, silence filled the room again. Not the quiet of rest, the quiet of avoidance. Saren realized she had asked the right question, and she had received her answer. The pause did not arrive suddenly. It stretched into the room slowly, shaped by hesitation rather than shock. Kyle stood between the two women, eyes lowered, shoulders tense. He did not speak again. He did not step forward. He did not reject what had been placed before him. He waited. That waiting carried weight. Saren watched him closely. She noticed the way his jaw tightened, then relaxed. The way his breath slowed, as if calm might replace decision. She had seen this before. This was how he delayed outcomes. This was how he let time speak for him. Margot remained still. Her expression showed no impatience. She understood this pause well. It had served her many times before. Saren felt something settle inside her chest. Not pain, not anger, understanding. This pause was not confusion. It was choice without courage. In that silence, Kyle allowed direction to remain unchanged. He allowed terms to stand. He allowed his wife to face control alone. Seconds passed, then more. Saren realized the pause carried a message clearer than words. By saying nothing, Kyle agreed to everything already spoken. He agreed to conditions. He agreed to exclusion. He agreed to her shrinking further. Silence had taken a side. Saren inhaled slowly. She did not rush to fill the space. She did not rescue him from discomfort. She let the pause exist as it was. This was the moment she would remember later, not the folder, not the conditions. This. She had asked him to speak. He had chosen stillness. The child inside her moved gently. The sensation grounded her. This was no longer about marriage alone. It was about example, about what silence taught. Kyle finally looked up. His eyes met hers briefly. In them, she saw care. She saw regret. She did not see resolve. That was enough. The pause ended nothing out loud. No argument followed. No decision announced. Yet everything had already changed. Saren did not speak right away. She did not need to. The room had already answered her. She looked at Kyle once more, not searching now, but seeing. She saw a man who cared, yet would not confront. A husband who loved, yet would not protect. A partner who chose calm over clarity. And she understood her place. She was valued, but not defended. Loved, but not backed. Included in words, excluded in action. This truth did not arrive as heartbreak. It arrived as calm, the kind that follows clarity once illusion fades. Saren realized she had been waiting for permission to matter, waiting for someone else to draw lines. She had every right to draw herself. She had mistaken patience for strength and silence for peace. She understood now that silence never stays neutral. It sides with whoever already holds power. Margot had not taken Kyle from her. Kyle had stepped back willingly. And in that space, control moved forward without resistance. Saren stood up slowly. The movement felt deliberate, grounded. She placed a hand over her stomach, a quiet reminder of what mattered most. "I see," she said. No accusation followed, no demand, just recognition. Kyle looked up, startled by the steadiness in her voice. He opened his mouth, perhaps sensing what was coming too late. Saren did not wait for him to speak. She had already heard everything she needed. This is where the story pauses and turns toward you. If you were in her place, what would you do? Would you wait longer, hoping silence would turn into courage? Would you stay, trusting comfort over clarity, or would you choose yourself before silence teaches your child the same lesson? Share your answer in the comments. Stories like this live through shared truth. Saren did not storm out. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply understood, and once understanding arrives, staying becomes a choice rather than a habit. That night marked the end of waiting, not because someone spoke, but because someone finally listened to what silence had been saying all along. Saren waited until the apartment settled into stillness. The lights of the city continued their quiet glow outside the windows, unaware of the decision forming within its walls. Kyle had fallen asleep on the couch, jacket still on, one hand resting against his chest as if holding himself together through habit. Saren stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. Love still lived there. That truth did not vanish because clarity arrived. Yet love alone no longer felt safe. She turned away without waking him. In the bedroom, she moved slowly, deliberately. No rushing, no shaking hands. She opened the closet and chose only what mattered. Comfortable clothes, personal items, documents she had gathered quietly over weeks. Nothing extravagant, nothing symbolic. Each folded piece felt like reclaiming space she had once given away. She packed for herself, not for reaction, not to be noticed, not to be chased. This was not an exit meant to teach a lesson. It was an exit meant to protect peace. Her hand rested over her stomach often. The movement grounded her. This was no longer about endurance. It was about example. She left behind things once prized. Dresses chosen for approval. Shoes worn to fit expectations. Objects that carried weight she no longer wished to hold. The room grew emptier as the bag filled. Not stripped, lightened. Saren paused by the mirror. She studied her reflection carefully. She looked tired. Calm. Certain. She did not cry. Tears belonged to confusion. This moment held clarity. She placed the bag by the door and moved quietly through the apartment one last time. The living room, the kitchen, the space where so much silence had lived. No notes were written, no explanations prepared. Words had already failed where they mattered most. Saren returned to the bedroom and lay down for a brief rest. She did not sleep. She breathed. She waited for morning. This night marked the end of shrinking, and the beginning of choosing herself without apology. Morning arrived quietly. Pale light crept through the windows, softening the edges of the room. The city stirred below, unaware of the shift taking place above it. Kyle woke first. He noticed the stillness immediately, not the restful kind, the kind that signals absence. He sat up, rubbing his face, then saw the bag by the door. Saren stood near the window, dressed simply, posture steady. She looked rested in a way he had not seen for some time. "Where are you going?" he asked. His voice carried concern rather than command. It always had. Saren turned slowly. She did not rush her answer. "I'm leaving," she said. Kyle stood, confusion flashing across his face. "We can talk," he said. "This doesn't have to happen now." Saren nodded once. "We already talked." She spoke without sharpness, without accusation. The calm in her tone unsettled him more than anger ever could. Kyle gestured toward the couch, toward the apartment, toward everything they had built. "We just need time," he said. "This is a lot." Saren met his eyes. "It has been a lot for a long time." She reminded him of the meeting, of the folder, of the pause, not with bitterness, but with clarity. "You didn't speak," she said, "and I listened." Kyle tried to explain. He spoke of pressure, of loyalty, of needing space to manage conflict without damage. Saren listened fully. She always had. When he finished, she stepped closer. "I'm not leaving because you don't care," she said. "I'm leaving because caring without protection isn't enough." Kyle's shoulders dropped. He reached for her hand. She allowed the contact but did not hold on. "I don't want to fight," she said. "I don't want to be chosen later." The silence between them felt different now. Not heavy. Honest. Saren lifted her bag. "I need peace," she said. "And I need it now." Kyle stepped in front of the door without touching it. His movement stayed careful, as if any sudden action might shatter what little balance remained. "Give me time," he said. The words came out quietly, stripped of authority. This was not the voice he used in meetings. This was not the voice of command. It was the voice of someone who felt something slipping beyond reach. Saren looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the familiar pull. Time had always been his answer. Time to think. Time to adjust. Time to keep everyone steady without choosing sides. She understood why he asked. Time allowed comfort to continue. Time allowed conflict to rest. Time allowed him to avoid deciding. Kyle spoke again. He promised conversation. He promised boundaries. He promised change. His voice carried sincerity, and Saren did not doubt his intent. Intent had never been the problem. "I can fix this," he said. "Just not all at once." Saren breathed slowly. She placed her bag down for a moment, grounding herself before responding. "You've had time," she said. "You've had many chances to speak." Kyle shook his head slightly. "This is different." She nodded. "That's why I can't wait." Kyle's face tightened. He reached out again, this time holding her hand longer. His grip held warmth and familiarity. The life they shared pressed against the moment. "I love you," he said. "I know," Saren replied. She did not pull her hand away right away. She let the truth exist fully. Love lived here. It always had. Yet love without action had already shaped too much damage. Kyle asked again, softer now. "Please." Saren lifted her gaze. "If I stay," she said, "nothing changes. If I leave, something might." She picked up her bag. "I can't keep teaching myself how to wait," she said, "and I won't teach our child that silence is safety." Kyle stepped back, the request still visible in his eyes. Time had asked enough of her. Saren lifted her bag again, this time without hesitation. The weight felt manageable, lighter than what she'd been carrying inside for years. Kyle watched her, searching for a crack in her resolve. He saw sadness there, yes, but not doubt. That steadiness unsettled him more than anger would have. "I'm not running," Saren said quietly. "I'm choosing peace," she explained without defensiveness. Staying would mean returning to a cycle she now understood fully, waiting for words that never arrived, adjusting herself again and again, hoping action would follow reassurance. Leaving did not erase love. It protected her sense of self. Saren spoke of the child, her hand resting gently over her stomach. "This life needs calm," she said, "not tension dressed as patience." Kyle listened, his posture heavy with realization. For the first time, he understood this was not a threat or a test. This was a boundary. Saren moved past him slowly, giving him space to speak if he chose. He did not stop her again. He did not argue. He stood aside, allowing the choice to exist without obstruction. That mattered. At the door, Saren paused. She turned back, her voice steady. "I hope you find your voice," she said. "I hope you learn to use it." No bitterness followed. No warning. Just hope. Offered without attachment. Saren stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind her, the sound barely noticeable, yet final. As she walked away, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. Not the sharp kind that follows escape. The quiet kind that comes from alignment. She did not know exactly where she was going yet. She knew only that she was moving toward a life shaped by choice rather than endurance. Peace did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with breath returning to normal, with shoulders lowering, with the knowledge that she no longer needed permission to stand fully in her own life. And that was enough. Saren left without spectacle. There were no calls to reporters, no messages sent in anger, no scenes meant to wound pride or force regret. She did not seek witnesses for her pain. She chose quiet because quiet protected what mattered. Her departure did not announce itself. By the time questions surfaced, she was already gone. She did not contact lawyers right away. She did not demand explanations or apologies. She focused on logistics that supported calm, a place to rest, a routine that allowed breath, a future shaped by intention rather than reaction. Saren understood something many never do. Revenge binds you to the place you are trying to escape. She refused that bond. Kyle heard from others first. Questions about her absence. Concern framed as curiosity. He offered few answers. He did not chase headlines. He did not defend himself publicly. The silence remained, but it no longer belonged to her. Margot noticed the shift quickly. Control loses power when the subject steps away. There were no conversations to steer, no compliance to secure. Saren's quiet exit left no leverage to hold. Saren spoke to no one about blame. When asked, she shared truth without detail. "I needed peace," she said. That was all. She carried no bitterness into her next chapter. She did not rehearse arguments she never made. She did not wait for validation. She trusted her choice without requiring agreement. In leaving calmly, she kept her dignity intact. Strength does not always raise its voice. Sometimes it walks away with measured steps and steady breath. Sometimes it closes doors without slamming them. Saren chose that strength. Her story did not turn loud after she left. It grew quiet, grounded, focused. Each day built on routine rather than reaction. Each choice centered on what supported safety and growth. There was no triumph in her departure. No satisfaction drawn from loss on the other side. Only clarity. And clarity proved enough. Saren did not leave to punish. She left to protect. She did not exit in anger. She exited in alignment. That choice carried her forward without noise. The town greeted Saren without curiosity or judgment. It moved at a slower pace, shaped by tides rather than deadlines. Mornings arrived with salt air and muted light. Evenings settled early, wrapped in routine rather than noise. Saren rented a small house near the water. Nothing impressive. Nothing meant to impress. A porch that faced the shore. Windows that opened wide. Floors that carried the sound of footsteps instead of silence. For the first time in years, she slept without tension in her shoulders. She learned the town by walking it. The same cafe each morning. The same faces that nodded without asking questions. Shop owners who remembered orders instead of status. No one cared who she had been married to. No one cared what she left behind. That anonymity felt like safety. Saren found comfort in predictability. She woke early. She walked along the shore as the sun rose. She learned which days brought strong wind and which brought stillness. Her body adjusted to the rhythm without effort. There were moments when memory surfaced. A penthouse view, a quiet luxury she once believed meant security. Those thoughts passed without pulling her backward. Peace carried more weight than comfort ever had. She furnished the house slowly. Second-hand pieces, warm colors, practical choices, each item placed with care rather than approval in mind. Neighbors offered help without pressure. A woman down the street shared soup recipes. An older man fixed a loose step without asking payment. Community arrived through action rather than words. Saren realized how much energy she had spent managing perception. Here, no one watched closely enough to judge. That freedom allowed her to breathe fully. Evenings ended early. She read by the window. She wrote lists for the days ahead. She rested her hands over her stomach and spoke softly to the life growing there. This town did not promise ease. Work would be honest. Resources would be limited. Yet the absence of control felt like relief. Saren understood something simple and powerful. Peace does not announce itself. It settles quietly when no one demands performance. In that coastal town, she began again without noise, without power, and without fear. Ivo arrived just before sunrise. The night had been calm, marked by steady breath and quiet focus. Saren labored without panic, guided by preparation rather than fear. The small clinic near the water felt nothing like the hospital she once toured with advisors and schedules. Here, voices stayed low. Hands moved with care rather than urgency. When Ivo cried for the first time, the sound filled the room without echo. It was not loud. It was strong. Saren held him close, her body trembling from effort and relief. He felt warm and real against her chest. His fingers curled instinctively, grasping fabric as if claiming space in the world. Tears came then, not from pain, from release. She studied his face carefully, the curve of his nose, the calm set of his brow. He carried traces of a man she once loved and a life she chose to protect. She named him Ivo, a name that felt solid and simple, free of expectation. The nurse smiled and stepped back, allowing space rather than filling it. That choice mattered. Saren rested, learning the shape of motherhood through presence rather than instruction. She listened to Ivo's breathing. She counted each rise and fall of his chest. Her world narrowed in the best way possible. There was no announcement sent, no family notified beyond what necessity required. This moment belonged to them alone. In the days that followed, Saren learned a new rhythm. Feeding, resting, walking the floor at night. Each task carried fatigue, yet none felt heavy. Purpose replaced anxiety. She noticed how calm entered her body through repetition, how confidence formed through doing rather than planning. There was no one directing her steps, no one measuring progress, just instinct and care. Ivo settled easily. He slept best near the sound of the sea. He responded to her voice without startle. Saren spoke to him often, narrating small moments, grounding herself as much as him. Holding him, she understood the truth fully. This life did not require wealth to begin well. It required safety, steadiness, and love that showed up without conditions. And she had chosen all three. Saren returned to work slowly, choosing effort that fit the life she was building rather than the life she left behind. She took a position at a local business near the shore, steady hours, modest pay, honest expectations. No prestige followed her name. No one asked about her past. She welcomed that. Work gave structure to her days. Parenting gave meaning to every hour. Healing followed naturally when both aligned. Mornings began early. Saren prepared simple breakfasts, packed what she needed, and carried Ivo with her whenever possible. The town made space for mothers without fuss. People held doors. They offered smiles. No one treated her like a burden or a symbol. Some days were exhausting. Ivo cried without reason. Sleep came in pieces. Work required focus she sometimes struggled to summon. Yet even on difficult days she felt grounded. She was tired, not depleted. Saren noticed how healing arrived through routine rather than reflection. Folding laundry, preparing meals, walking Ivo along the shore after work. Each repeated action rebuilt trust in herself. She no longer waited for permission to rest. She listened to her body. She allowed quiet without guilt. Memories surfaced at times. A softer bed, easier access to help, convenience she once relied on. Those thoughts passed quickly. Comfort without safety no longer tempted her. Ivo grew steadily. He responded to consistency, to her presence, to the calm that shaped his days. Saren spoke to him often, explaining the world in simple language. She believed children understood tone before meaning. She watched his curiosity form, his confidence build through secure attachment rather than material display. Saren healed by doing, by choosing each day again, by trusting small progress over grand plans. She noticed how her voice returned, how decisions no longer felt heavy, how her shoulders stayed relaxed even under strain. There were no shortcuts, no dramatic shifts. Healing grew through patience. She now offered herself freely. In caring for Ivo, she relearned care for herself. She understood then what wealth never provided. Peace grows where effort aligns with values. And in that alignment, Saren found strength she no longer questioned. Saren believed values formed quietly, shaped by what a child sees more than what a child hears. She did not lecture. She modeled. Days followed a simple rhythm. Wake early, eat together, work, walk, rest, repeat. Ivo learned stability through predictability. He learned trust through consistency. Saren spoke to him as she moved through tasks. She named feelings. She explained choices. When plans changed, she said why. When she made mistakes, she acknowledged them. These moments mattered more than rules. Routine created safety. Ivo learned patience by watching her wait. He learned kindness by watching her greet others with respect. He learned responsibility by seeing her show up, even when tired. Money did not frame these lessons. Presence did. Saren taught him to put toys back, not for order, but for care. She taught him to say thank you with eye contact. She taught him to listen fully when someone spoke. These habits formed without force. Evenings ended the same way. A warm meal, a short walk, a story read aloud. Saren chose books that valued effort, honesty, and courage. She asked questions afterward, letting Ivo speak freely. His answers often surprised her. He learned that calm followed consistency, that rules felt fair when they stayed steady, that love did not disappear with disappointment. Saren avoided comparison. She did not point out what others had. She focused on what they shared: time, attention, trust. When Ivo asked why they lived in a small house, she answered simply, "Because it's enough." When he asked why she worked so much, she said, "Because taking care of ourselves matters." These explanations stayed clear, not heavy. Saren noticed how routine gave Ivo confidence. He approached new spaces without fear. He trusted adults who treated him kindly. He recovered quickly from setbacks. Stability shaped him more than luxury ever could. Saren understood the deeper truth. Children do not need abundance to feel secure. They need reliability. They need adults who mean what they say and show up when it counts. Through routine, Saren built a foundation no one could take from him. Saren never lied to Ivo about his father. She believed truth did not need weight to be honest. It needed care. When Ivo was small, questions came softly. Why there were no photos on the wall? Why other children talked about their fathers picking them up? Saren answered in ways that fit his age, never avoiding, never overwhelming. "Your father loved me," she said once while tying his shoes. He had trouble standing up when it mattered. Ivo accepted that answer easily. Children trust tone before detail. As Ivo grew older, the questions changed. They carried curiosity rather than confusion. Saren adjusted her words with the same care. She explained that his father worked hard, that he carried responsibility, that he struggled with choices that required courage. She did not excuse. She did not accuse. "He wasn't ready," she said, "and I needed to protect us." Ivo listened quietly. He asked thoughtful questions. Saren answered each one honestly, without bitterness. She refused to turn absence into identity. She never spoke badly of Kyle, not because she protected his image, but because she protected Ivo's sense of self. Children carry both parents inside them. She would not poison that space. At the same time, she did not soften truth into comfort. She taught Ivo that love requires action, that silence affects others, that doing nothing still teaches a lesson. When Ivo asked if his father knew about him, Saren nodded. Yes. When he asked why he wasn't there, she answered plainly. Because sometimes people avoid hard choices. That truth landed without harm. Saren watched how Ivo processed information. She gave him space to feel without directing his response. She allowed sadness without trying to fix it. She allowed questions without rushing answers. Over time, Ivo learned an important lesson early. Absence does not define worth. Saren's honesty built trust. Ivo believed her words because they stayed consistent. He never felt lied to. He never felt pushed to feel one way or another. She left room for the future without promising it. "If he ever shows up," she said once, "we'll talk about it together." That openness mattered. By telling the truth with care, Saren gave Ivo something wealth never could: a clear story, a stable foundation, and the freedom to decide who he would become. Kyle's empire continued to rise after Saren left. Markets responded to his discipline. Companies expanded under his direction. Deals closed cleanly. Press releases praised focus and resilience. His name carried weight across industries that measured success through scale and speed. From the outside, nothing appeared broken. Kyle filled his calendar with purpose. Meetings stacked neatly. Travel kept him moving. Progress arrived on schedule. He told himself momentum mattered. He told himself work would steady what felt unsettled. It didn't. The penthouse grew quieter without Saren. Not empty. Quiet. The kind that presses inward rather than echoing. Kyle returned home late more often, not because work demanded it, but because stillness waited otherwise. He expanded aggressively. New ventures, new regions, new responsibilities. Growth felt easier than reflection. Strategy felt safer than feeling. People around him noticed the shift. They praised his intensity. They admired his availability. He became known as sharper, more distant, less patient with anything that slowed pace. Success arrived faster than satisfaction. Kyle sat at long tables making decisions that shaped thousands of lives. Yet, he struggled to sit alone at night without reaching for distraction. His phone stayed active. His attention stayed external. He avoided places that reminded him of Saren. He avoided conversations that drifted toward family. He redirected questions smoothly, practiced at moving focus away. His empire grew because he gave it everything. What he did not realize yet was this: he gave it everything because something else was gone. Growth offered proof of value. It offered metrics. It offered applause without vulnerability. None of it required courage. Kyle convinced himself this phase would pass. That once stability returned, meaning would follow. That effort earned peace, yet peace never arrived on schedule. The empire expanded. The quiet followed. And in the space between achievement and fulfillment, Kyle felt the cost of choosing productivity over presence. Kyle did not stay alone for long. Introductions came easily. Dinners followed. People found him interesting, powerful, attentive when needed. He dated women who admired his success and matched his schedule. The relationships looked balanced from the outside. None of them lasted. Conversation stayed light. Even when laughter filled a room, something remained untouched. Kyle listened, responded, and offered generosity, yet he kept a part of himself guarded. He had learned how quickly closeness demanded courage. He avoided depth without naming it. When questions turned personal, he redirected. When expectations grew, he slowed things down. He told himself he needed ease, not complexity. He told himself time would decide what fit. What fit never arrived. Partners sensed distance before he did. They noticed how he stayed present without opening, how he offered comfort without commitment, how he left rooms early when conversations edged toward truth. Some left quietly. Others tried harder. None reached him. Kyle felt relief when relationships ended, followed by a sharp awareness he quickly buried. Breakups cost little on paper. No shared home. No shared future. Yet each ending left him more aware of what he could not replace. He missed being known. He missed the way Saren listened without agenda, the way she understood his silences without excusing them. He missed the comfort of being seen fully, not admired from a distance. Dates began to blur together. Similar conversations, similar compliments, similar exits. He learned how to perform interest without investment. At night, he returned to an apartment that reflected his taste but not his life. Rooms stayed clean. Surfaces stayed untouched. Nothing held memory. Kyle realized something unsettling. He had chosen relationships that required nothing from him because he had learned how costly choosing could be. Avoidance followed him into connection. Success brought access. It did not bring intimacy. And in the absence of depth, Kyle felt the same quiet he once avoided at home. Only now, there was no one to share it with. Margot remained close after Saren left. Her presence filled gaps Kyle did not know how to manage alone. She attended meetings that no longer required her. She reviewed plans that Kyle had once handled independently. She offered guidance without waiting to be asked. At first, Kyle welcomed it. Familiar structure felt grounding. Margot understood pressure. She understood legacy. She spoke his language fluently. Over time, her involvement deepened. She adjusted his schedule. She suggested priorities. She weighed in on decisions beyond business, framing them as support rather than control. Kyle allowed it because resistance required energy he did not want to spend. Margot never mentioned Saren directly. She did not need to. Her absence shaped every interaction. She spoke of focus and discipline. She reminded Kyle how much was at stake. She filled evenings with conversation meant to steady him. She stayed late, leaving only when exhaustion forced pause. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt occupied, yet something felt off. Kyle noticed how little space remained for reflection, how often his mother answered questions he had not voiced, how quickly her opinions replaced his hesitation. Margot believed she was helping. She believed proximity prevented collapse. She believed her role had simply expanded to meet need. Kyle did not challenge her. He lacked the strength for another boundary. Silence felt easier than adjustment. He realized later how familiar the pattern felt. Margot filled space when Kyle avoided decision. She always had. What changed now was the cost. Her presence prevented loneliness, but it also prevented growth. She softened consequence. She absorbed discomfort. She kept him busy enough to avoid facing what he lost. Kyle appreciated her loyalty. He respected her effort, yet something in him recognized the cycle returning. Without Saren, Margot became the constant voice again, the guide, the anchor, the authority. Kyle wondered when he had last chosen something fully on his own. The question lingered without answer, and in that quiet recognition, he felt the shape of a life guided by others rather than lived with intention. The emptiness did not announce itself. It showed up in ordinary moments Kyle once ignored. He stood in elevators alone, watching numbers climb without feeling progress. He ate meals chosen for convenience rather than care. He returned home to rooms that reflected success but held no warmth. Everything worked. Nothing settled. At night, sleep came late. His mind stayed active, replaying decisions without resolution. He reviewed conversations he never finished, words he never said, moments he postponed until later. Later had passed. Kyle noticed how often he reached for distraction. Messages, news, work updates, anything that filled space. Silence felt heavier now that Saren was gone. It carried memory rather than rest. He remembered how she used to sit with him in quiet, how her presence softened his thoughts rather than demanding answers. He realized how rare that had been. Without her, quiet turned sharp. He tried to name the feeling and failed. It was not sadness alone, not regret alone. It was absence layered with responsibility, the understanding that something meaningful had ended because he refused to choose when it mattered. Kyle walked through his apartment one evening, touching objects without purpose. He paused by the window and watched the city below. Movement everywhere, purpose nowhere. He thought about the child Saren carried away from this life. A life growing without him. A future shaped by choices he avoided. The thought landed fully for the first time. He had not lost Saren to anger. He had lost her to hesitation. That realization stripped comfort from success. Achievements no longer distracted him. They felt hollow, stripped of meaning by what they could not replace. Kyle understood something late but clear. Power offers control. It does not offer fulfillment. Without connection, his life ran efficiently toward nowhere. The emptiness stayed because he finally stopped running from it. Regret did not arrive as panic. It arrived as clarity. Kyle began noticing moments he could no longer ignore. A child laughing in a restaurant, a father lifting a toddler onto his shoulders. A simple gesture that once passed unnoticed now held weight. He found himself calculating time backward, not in years, but in moments. The meeting where he stayed quiet, the conversation he postponed, the pause he allowed to stand in place of decision. Each memory carried the same truth. He had believed waiting preserved options. Instead, waiting removed them. Kyle thought often about Saren, not the arguments they never had, but the calm she brought into spaces he filled with pressure. He remembered her steadiness, her patience, how she made room for his silence without accepting it forever. He thought about the child, about the way the boy had looked at him on the shore. Curious, unafraid, unaware. That gaze followed Kyle into boardrooms and bedrooms alike. Regret sharpened when he realized what could not be reclaimed easily. You cannot return to the moment that asked for courage and offer it late. Kyle tried to justify his choices. He reminded himself of loyalty, of responsibility, of complexity. None of it erased outcome. He recognized how often he chose ease over action, how often he trusted time to soften consequences rather than stepping forward. Regret grew not because he lacked love, but because he failed to protect it. He understood then why success felt empty. It measured progress without meaning. It rewarded effort without asking who benefited. Kyle sat alone one evening, the city humming below, and admitted what he had avoided. Silence had cost him everything that mattered. The realization did not break him. It grounded him. Regret, when faced honestly, carries direction. Kyle did not yet know what redemption would require. He did not know if repair was possible. He knew only this. Avoidance had shaped his life long enough, and whatever came next would demand the courage he once withheld. The charity event unfolded with precision. White tents lined the shore. Soft music drifted above conversation. Guests moved easily between tables, dressed for attention and comfort alike. It was the kind of evening Kyle knew well. Familiar faces, familiar praise, familiar rhythm. He had agreed to attend out of obligation rather than interest. A regional initiative tied to community development. The location happened to sit near the coast, a detail he barely noted when accepting the invitation. Kyle stood among donors and organizers, listening, responding, offering measured remarks. His posture stayed composed. His smile arrived on cue. To anyone watching, he looked settled. Inside, he felt distant. The sea air reached him even under the tent. Salt and wind slipped past linen walls, carrying a quiet he had missed without realizing it. Conversations around him blurred. Laughter landed without effect. Kyle excused himself politely, saying he needed air. No one questioned it. He moved easily through the crowd, past tables and soft lights, until the sound of waves grew clearer. The shore stretched open beyond the event space. Fewer people gathered there. The noise thinned. The pace slowed. Kyle removed his jacket and folded it over his arm. He breathed deeply for the first time that evening. He did not know what he was looking for. He knew only that standing still felt necessary. This was not the place he expected memory to return, not the setting where loss would step forward. Yet the shore has a way of stripping pretense. And as Kyle looked toward the water, unaware of what waited ahead, the evening prepared to change him. Kyle walked farther from the tents, letting the distance grow between himself and the crowd. The sand cooled beneath his shoes. The steady sound of waves replaced conversation and music. Each step eased pressure he had carried without noticing. He stopped near the waterline. The horizon stretched wide, open, unconcerned. The sea moved with patience, unconstrained by schedules or expectation. Kyle watched it for a long moment, hands resting loosely at his sides. This was what he had needed. Space without demand. He loosened his tie and breathed again, slower this time. The night air felt clean against his skin. For the first time in months, his mind quieted enough to allow thought without urgency. He looked back briefly toward the event. Lights shimmered. People gathered in clusters. Applause rose and fell. He felt no pull to return yet. Turning back toward the shore, his attention caught on movement farther down the beach. A child ran near the water, feet sinking into wet sand. The boy bent low, scooping handfuls and shaping small forms with care. He worked with focus, not rushing, smiling when shapes fell apart and starting again without frustration. Kyle slowed. Something about the scene held him. Not nostalgia, not comparison. Recognition without context. He stayed where he was, watching quietly. The child's laughter carried lightly across the sand, untouched by the formality behind him. It sounded free. Kyle felt his chest tighten without reason he could name. He did not yet know why his feet refused to move. Kyle stayed where he was, watching the child without interruption. The boy worked with quiet focus, crouching low, shaping damp sand with small, careful hands. He did not look toward the tents. He did not glance back for approval. His world existed fully in front of him. Each time a shape collapsed, the boy laughed. Not embarrassed, not annoyed. He simply rebuilt it, adjusting pressure, learning through touch rather than instruction. Kyle felt something shift inside him. This was not how children moved in his world. Children he knew followed schedules. They were corrected quickly. Their moments were measured and managed. This boy moved without urgency, guided by curiosity rather than direction. The child stood and ran a short distance, then returned, dragging a stick behind him to draw lines in the sand. He hummed softly, lost in the act of creation. The sound carried ease Kyle had not felt in years. Kyle realized he was holding his breath. He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the small figure by the water. The boy's confidence came from safety rather than instruction. Someone had given him space to be fully present. That understanding landed before logic. Kyle felt an unexpected ache, not envy, loss. He imagined moments he never had. Teaching a child to build something without correcting the first failure, standing nearby without hovering, letting laughter arrive without reason. The boy glanced up briefly, scanning the shore, then returned to his work. No fear, no hesitation. Someone nearby made the world feel secure. Kyle followed the boy's gaze. A woman stood a short distance away, watching with quiet attention. Her posture held familiarity rather than control. She did not rush him. She did not instruct. She trusted. Recognition hit Kyle before memory fully formed. Kyle felt recognition before his mind supplied a name. It arrived as pressure in his chest, steady and undeniable. The woman by the water shifted her weight, brushing sand from her hands. The movement was familiar, unhurried, grounded. The way she stood carried certainty rather than effort. He took a step closer without realizing it. The boy ran toward her, laughter lifting as he reached her side. She knelt, brushing sand from his knees, her touch gentle and practiced. She smiled at him with warmth that did not perform for anyone else. Kyle felt the truth land through sensation rather than thought. This was not a scene he observed. It was a life that continued without him. The woman looked up then, eyes meeting his across the stretch of sand. Time did not stop. It narrowed. Saren. She looked different, not older, stronger. Her face carried calm rather than caution. Her eyes held clarity rather than patience. She did not freeze when she saw him. She did not turn away. She simply looked. Kyle's breath caught. The sound of the waves pressed closer. The event behind him faded fully from awareness. He felt exposed in a way success never allowed. Saren's gaze did not accuse. It did not invite. It acknowledged. The boy tugged at her hand, pointing toward the water. She nodded, answering him softly before standing again. Her attention returned to Kyle, steady and unguarded. In that moment, Kyle understood the scale of what he faced. He had not lost her to distance or time. He had lost her to choice, and the life she built stood fully formed, balanced by presence rather than power. Recognition did not hurt because it surprised him. It hurt because it confirmed what he already knew. Loss becomes real when you stand close enough to touch it and cannot. Kyle stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. He did not want to startle the moment. He did not want to intrude on a life clearly held with care. "Saren," he said. His voice stayed low, not rehearsed, not guarded. She nodded once, acknowledging him without surprise. "KL." The boy looked between them, curious. His eyes lingered on Kyle for a moment, open and calm, then returned to the sand at his feet. Kyle swallowed. He looked at the child again, this time without avoidance. "Is he?" His voice faltered, then steadied. "Is he yours?" "Yes," Saren said. The answer came without pause, without edge, without explanation. Kyle felt the truth settle fully. Heavy, clear. "How old is he?" he asked. 6, she replied. 6 years. Kyle counted backward without effort. The timing aligned perfectly with the night he had asked for time. With the morning she had chosen peace. He lowered himself slightly, bringing his eyes closer to the boy's level. "Hello," he said gently. The boy studied him, head tilted. "Hi." No fear, no recognition, no bond. Kyle felt something give inside him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ivo," the boy replied, then returned to drawing lines in the sand, satisfied with the exchange. Kyle straightened slowly, his hands trembling just enough to notice. He looked at Saren. "You didn't tell me," he said. "You didn't ask," she replied. Not sharp, not defensive, simply true. Kyle nodded. He had avoided many questions when answers carried weight. The truth stood between them now, undeniable. This was not a story delayed. It was a life lived. And he had arrived late. They did not speak again on the shore. Saren waited until Ivo ran ahead toward the edge of the water, absorbed in his own world. She nodded once toward a quieter stretch of beach away from the event and the path of passers-by. Kyle followed without question. They walked in silence, not the silence that avoids, the silence that prepares. When they stopped, the sounds around them softened. Waves moved in slow rhythm. Wind brushed past without force. The distance from the tents felt intentional, as if this conversation required space, untouched by audience or expectation. Saren faced him fully. "This is not a conversation for appearances," she said, "and not one for fixing." Kyle nodded. His posture changed. Shoulders lowered. Hands rested open at his sides. For once, he did not try to manage the moment. "I understand," he said. Saren studied him carefully. She saw strain there. Fatigue. Something stripped down to truth. Yet she did not rush. "This stays honest," she continued. "If we're going to speak, we do it without defense." Kyle swallowed and nodded again. "I'll listen." That mattered. They stood a few feet apart. No touching, no crowd, no hierarchy. Just two people standing on equal ground for the first time in years. Saren spoke first, not because she needed control, but because she carried the story he had never fully heard. She did not accuse. She did not list grievances. She framed the conversation around impact rather than intent. "I left because I couldn't stay quiet anymore," she said. "Not because I stopped loving you." Kyle held her gaze. He did not interrupt. He did not explain. He stayed still. Saren noticed that restraint. It was new. "This is the space I needed then," she said. "A space where my voice wasn't optional." The private nature of the moment stripped away performance. There were no roles to maintain, no approval to seek, only truth, waiting to be spoken and received. Kyle understood something immediately. This was not a second chance. This was accountability. Saren did not begin with pain. She began with movement. I left with nothing dramatic, she said. No plan to prove a point. I left to breathe. Kyle listened, eyes steady, jaw relaxed. He did not shift. He did not search for an opening to respond. Saren spoke of the coastal town, of the quiet mornings and early nights, of learning how much noise she had been carrying inside herself. She spoke of work that felt honest rather than impressive, of community built through consistency, not influence. She spoke of pregnancy without romance or fear, of learning trust through routine, of building strength by showing up each day without anyone directing her steps. I had to relearn myself, she said. I had been folding inward for so long I forgot what it felt like to take up space. Kyle felt each word land. He did not correct. He did not soften meaning. He allowed her story to remain intact. Saren spoke of Ivo, of nights without sleep and days shaped by repetition, of learning patience through care rather than endurance. She spoke of teaching values through example rather than instruction. I didn't raise him with anger, she said. I raised him with truth. She explained how she answered questions without shaping blame, how she chose honesty without bitterness, how she protected Ivo's sense of self by refusing to turn absence into identity. I didn't keep him from you, she said calmly. I kept him from confusion. Kyle closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. He stayed silent. Saren spoke of healing not as a destination but as a process, of moments when memory returned and passed without pulling her backward, of learning how peace feels when it is not borrowed from someone else's approval. I didn't become stronger to survive, she said. I became stronger because I stopped surviving. Her voice never shook, not because she felt nothing, because she had already felt everything. When she finished, the space between them felt full rather than tense. Kyle realized something profound. This was the life that grew when he stayed quiet, and it had grown well. Kyle did not respond right away. He stood with his hands open, fingers relaxed, eyes steady on Saren's face. He resisted every habit that once protected him. He did not explain. He did not qualify. He did not search for balance in the middle of her truth. He listened, not to reply, to understand. Each part of her journey settled into him without resistance. The town, the routines, the way she rebuilt herself without permission. He felt the weight of years he missed, not as accusation, but as fact. Kyle noticed how different this felt from past conversations. He was not waiting for a pause. He was not planning a response. He was present in a way he had avoided before. Listening asked more of him than speaking ever had. He recognized moments she described without realizing their cost at the time. The way she shrank herself, the way he mistook calm for care, the way his silence trained the space around him. Kyle understood now that intent had never protected anyone. Only action had that power. As Saren spoke of Ivo, Kale felt emotion rise and did not push it away. He let it move through him without defense. He accepted the truth without asking for relief. He thought about the boy's calm focus by the water, the confidence shaped by presence, the safety built through routine. Kyle understood his absence had not broken that child. It had simply removed him from the story. That knowledge hurt because it was honest. Kale noticed how Saren watched him as she spoke, not with expectation, with awareness. She was reading whether he could hold truth without retreat. He stayed. When she finished, Kyle nodded once, not as agreement, as acknowledgement. I hear you, he said. The words carried weight because they arrived without explanation. He felt no need to soften impact or ask for understanding. Understanding had arrived through listening. For the first time, Kyle grasped the full meaning of accountability. It begins with silence of a different kind, the kind that listens rather than avoids. Kyle inhaled slowly before he spoke, not to prepare a defense, to steady himself. I failed you, he said. The words landed clean. No conditions, no context added. He did not speak about pressure or loyalty or complexity. He did not mention intention. He named outcome. I chose quiet when you needed protection, he continued. I chose comfort when I needed courage. Saren watched him closely. She did not interrupt. She listened the way he had listened to her. Kale kept his eyes on hers. I told myself waiting was kindness. It wasn't. It was avoidance. He acknowledged the moment that ended everything. The pause, the meeting, the folder on the table. He named it without minimizing. When you asked me to speak, I didn't, he said. That silence taught you exactly where you stood. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not suggest growth. He did not promise change. He stayed with truth. I let my mother fill space I should have protected for us, he said. I let systems decide what required a human voice. His jaw tightened briefly. He allowed it. I missed your pregnancy, he said quietly. I missed years I can't reclaim. The weight of that admission pressed into the space between them. Kyle did not rush past it. I'm sorry, he said, for leaving you alone while standing right there. Saren felt the difference immediately. This apology did not ask her to make him feel better. It did not seek resolution. It carried accountability without demand. Kyle finished with the hardest truth. I don't know what I deserve now. I only know what I owe. He lowered his gaze for a moment, then lifted it again. I will respect whatever boundary you set, he said. I will not argue with the cost of my choices. The apology ended without flourish. No promises followed, and for the first time, Kyle felt the shape of humility rather than regret. Saren did not answer right away. She looked out toward the water, watching the tide move in its steady rhythm. The sound grounded her. She placed both feet firmly in the sand, as if reminding herself where she stood now. When she turned back to Kyle, her expression held neither anger nor relief. It held clarity. Your apology matters, she said, because it didn't ask me to fix anything for you. Kyle nodded, accepting the statement without expectation. Saren spoke carefully, not to protect him, but to honor herself. I didn't leave to punish you, she said. I left because I was disappearing. I needed to choose myself before I taught my child how to disappear too. She acknowledged his words without softening truth. What happened cannot be undone, she continued. The years you missed are real. The life I built happened without you. Kyle listened without interruption. Saren met his eyes. Respect comes before anything else, she said. And respect means you don't rush this. You don't ask for closeness you haven't earned. You don't assume access because you regret absence. She paused, allowing the boundary to stand clearly. Evo's life is stable, she said. That stability comes first. Any place you have in it must protect that. Kyle nodded again, the weight of her words settling fully. Saren did not promise reconciliation. She did not close the door either. I'm open to honesty, she said, to consistency, to presence that doesn't disappear when things feel uncomfortable. Her voice stayed calm, grounded in experience rather than hope. This isn't about rebuilding what we had, she said. It's about building something truthful, or nothing at all. She took a breath, feeling the strength of her own words. I won't carry fear again, she said, and I won't teach my child that love requires silence. The space between them felt settled, not strained. Respect had been established, not affection, not trust, respect. And that, Saren knew, was the only place anything real could begin. Margot did not learn about the child through gossip or speculation. She learned through fact. Kyle told her himself. He did not sit across from her at a long table. He did not prepare documents. He did not frame the conversation around planning or impact. He spoke plainly, standing near the window of her study, hands still, voice steady. I have a son, he said. Margot looked up from her notes slowly. Her expression did not change at once. Years of discipline kept reaction measured. A son, she repeated. Yes, Kyle said. His name is Evo. He is 6. The room stayed quiet. Margot closed the folder in front of her with care. She placed her hands on its cover, fingers aligned, posture composed. You were married, she said. Not a question. Yes. And Saren left, she added. Yes. Margot absorbed the information without visible strain. She had managed mergers with greater disruption. She had handled loss before. She had learned how to keep control by limiting reaction. What are the circumstances? She asked. Kyle answered without embellishment. He spoke of the coastal town, of Saren raising the child alone, of stability built without wealth, of a life that grew without oversight or permission. Margot listened without interruption. Her face remained calm, but something tightened around her eyes. Why am I hearing this now? She asked. Because now I know, Kyle replied. Margot studied him carefully. She noticed the difference immediately. His tone held firmness rather than caution. His posture did not shift to accommodate her response. She asked about logistics next, where the child lived. What protections existed? Who knew? Kyle answered only what mattered. "I'm not here to plan," he said. "I'm here to inform." That sentence landed heavier than any accusation. Margot realized then that this information arrived without invitation for direction. There was no folder, no outline, no space offered for control. The child existed beyond her reach. Margot nodded once. "This will require thought," she said. Kyle met her gaze. "It already has." For the first time in years, Margot felt uncertainty not because she lacked understanding, but because she lacked access. The child was real. The life was formed, and it had grown without her. Margot did not respond right away after Kyle left. She remained seated in her study, hands folded neatly on the desk, eyes fixed on the window beyond the shelves. The city below moved as it always had. Traffic flowed. Schedules held. None of it shifted in response to the news she had just received. Silence followed her long after the door closed. This silence was unfamiliar. Margot was known for response, for direction, for momentum. Yet now, no instruction formed. No plan assembled itself in her mind. She did not reach for her phone. She did not summon advisors. She sat still. The child's name echoed quietly. Evo. A life existed that had grown without her review, without her approval, without her design. That fact alone unsettled something she rarely examined. Margot had always believed order preserved stability. She had shaped outcomes by anticipating risk and narrowing possibility. Control to her was care expressed through structure. Yet this situation had formed beyond structure entirely. She replayed moments from the past with new awareness. The meeting where conditions were presented, the pause she had relied on, the way silence had served her aims without resistance. Now, that same silence returned, and it did not obey her. Margot realized she had nothing to say that would matter. Any demand would arrive late. Any condition would sound hollow. The life she would have managed had already been lived. She felt no anger, no panic, just a stark awareness of limitation. For the first time, Margot faced a truth she had long avoided. Control works only where people remain present to be controlled. Saren had stepped away. The child had grown. Kyle had changed. Silence stretched not as tactic, but as reckoning. Margot stayed quiet for days. She attended meetings with efficiency. She answered questions with precision. No one noticed a shift in her behavior. Inside, something loosened. She thought of legacy, not as assets or influence, but as impact. She considered how her guidance had shaped Kyle's avoidance rather than his courage. How her proximity had filled space that demanded independence. These thoughts did not soften her. They clarified her. Margot understood then that power, once lost, does not announce its departure. It simply stops responding. Her silence was not defeat. It was recognition. The control she once held no longer reached where love had grown without her. Margot noticed the loss of authority not through challenge, but through absence. It showed up in small moments first. Kyle stopped seeking her opinion before making decisions. He informed rather than consulted. Meetings began without her presence and ended without summary. She received updates instead of drafts. No one announced the change. It simply settled. Margot tested the shift once carefully. She offered guidance on a business decision Kyle had already approved. He listened politely, thanked her, and moved on without adjustment. That response landed harder than disagreement ever could. She realized then that influence does not disappear through confrontation. It fades when it is no longer required. Margot had always believed proximity equaled relevance. She stayed close to guide, to protect, to ensure outcomes aligned with vision. Yet Kyle no longer leaned toward her instinctively. He stood upright in his own choices. She noticed how conversations changed tone. Kyle spoke with certainty rather than explanation. He no longer framed decisions around balance or ease. He named priorities clearly and acted on them. Margot felt the unfamiliar edge of exclusion, not from family, but from control. She watched how quickly authority shifts when someone learns to occupy their own space. Kyle did not push her away. He simply did not leave room for a direction that no longer served him. This loss did not come with anger. It arrived with finality. Margot understood that she had trained Kyle well in many ways. Discipline, strategy, endurance. Yet she had also taught him to avoid conflict by absorbing it. Now, that lesson no longer governed him. Her authority dissolved because the conditions that supported it had changed. The child's existence altered everything. A life beyond her influence forced Kyle to choose presence over process. He could not manage fatherhood through distance. He could not shape it through instruction alone. Margot saw this clearly. She recognized that control depends on silence as much as structure, and silence no longer belonged to her. For the first time, Margot experienced a boundary she did not set and could not cross, not because she was forbidden, but because she was no longer central. Authority does not vanish loudly. It recedes when relevance shifts. Margot remained composed. She did not argue. She did not demand recognition. She accepted what could not be reclaimed. In losing authority, she faced a new position, not as architect, not as guide, but as witness. Kyle's choice did not announce itself with speeches or declarations. It showed up in where he stood and how long he stayed. He began by changing his schedule, not dramatically, intentionally. Fewer late nights, fewer meetings that existed only to maintain appearance. He carved out time that could not be negotiated away. Presence required space. Kyle traveled to the coast without fanfare. He did not arrive with gifts or plans. He arrived with patience. He asked Saren what worked. He listened to the routines already in place and respected them without question. When he saw Ivo again, he did not rush closeness. He knelt to the boy's level, introduced himself simply, and let the moment unfold at its own pace. He did not correct. He did not instruct. He observed. Presence asked him to slow down. He learned bedtime rhythms, school drop-offs, the way small questions surfaced during walks rather than sit-down talks. He learned that attention mattered more than explanation. Kyle chose consistency over intensity. He showed up when he said he would. He left when it was time to leave. He did not press for more than was offered. Saren noticed the change, not through words but through absence of tension. Kyle no longer tried to manage outcomes. He accepted boundaries as structure rather than rejection. This was new. Margot watched from a distance. She offered no direction. She made no comment. Kyle did not seek her approval. He no longer needed permission to prioritize what mattered. Choosing presence meant relinquishing control. Kyle understood that fully now. He accepted that fatherhood required humility. That trust formed through repetition. That love grew where safety stayed consistent. He did not attempt to reclaim the past. He invested in what existed now. In choosing presence, Kyle stepped into a role no one else could fill. Not as provider, not as authority, as father. Margot's influence receded not because Kyle rejected her, but because something more essential demanded his attention. Control lost ground where care took root. Kyle stood firmly in that truth, understanding at last that love grows best where presence remains. Kyle did not return to Saren's life with urgency. He returned with regularity. He arrived when he said he would. He left when it was time to leave. He did not look for shortcuts or gestures meant to impress. His presence carried no performance. It carried reliability. At first, the visits stayed brief. A walk by the shore, sitting on the porch while Ivo played nearby. Simple conversations about schedules and needs. Kyle listened more than he spoke. He asked before acting, "What works for you? What does he need today?" Those questions mattered. Saren noticed the difference immediately, not because Kyle changed who he was, but because he stopped trying to manage outcomes. He accepted boundaries without resistance. He respected the life already in motion. Kyle adjusted his work without announcing sacrifice. He declined meetings that conflicted with time he had committed. He moved calls instead of asking others to bend. These decisions stayed quiet, yet consistent. Consistency carried weight. Ivo began to expect him, not with excitement that spikes and fades, but with calm certainty. He asked when Kyle would arrive and believed the answer. He waited without worry. Kyle understood then that showing up steadily required restraint. It meant letting go of control and accepting pace set by others. It meant honoring time rather than filling it. He learned how presence builds trust through repetition, not through explanation, not through apology, through doing the same thing again and again. Saren watched from a careful distance. She did not praise progress. She did not rush closeness. She allowed space for pattern to form. Kyle did not push against that distance. He respected it. He noticed how different this felt from his past efforts. There was no negotiation involved, no balancing act, just a clear commitment followed by action. He stopped measuring success through response. He measured it through follow-through. Weeks passed, then months. Kyle remained. Not every visit went smoothly. Some days Ivo ignored him. Some days conversations stayed quiet. Kyle stayed anyway, present without pressure. He learned that trust does not grow through intensity. It grows through dependability. And in showing up steadily, Kyle began laying a foundation that could carry weight without strain. Parenting moments arrived without ceremony. Kyle learned quickly that children reveal truth without filter. Ivo asked questions without concern for timing. He shifted moods without warning. He noticed inconsistency immediately. Kyle adapted. He learned how to tie shoes the way Ivo preferred. He learned which stories calmed him before bed and which sparked too much energy. He learned that listening mattered more than correcting. Small moments carried meaning. Building something together at the table, fixing a loose hinge, walking side by side without conversation. Kyle let Ivo set pace and direction. He followed rather than led. Ivo tested boundaries with ease. He pushed limits gently, watching response closely. Kyle held those limits without sharpness. He did not raise his voice. He did not retreat. Sarah noticed how Kyle handled frustration. He paused. He breathed. He adjusted. He did not deflect responsibility or assign blame. These moments built something new. Kyle learned how presence feels when it is not tied to authority. He accepted correction from Saren without defensiveness. He asked questions instead of assuming. He discovered joy in ordinary moments he once overlooked. A shared laugh, a finished task, a quiet nod of approval. Ivo began to trust him. Not quickly, not blindly. Gradually, trust showed up in small ways, reaching for Kyle's hand while crossing the street, asking him to stay a little longer, sharing thoughts without prompting. Kyle felt the weight of that trust and treated it with care. He did not speak badly of the past. He did not explain absence beyond what was asked. He stayed present in what existed. Parenting taught Kyle something leadership never had. You cannot manage a child into safety. You must remain. And remaining asked more of him than any position ever had. Patience did not come naturally to Kyle. It had never been required in his world of timelines and targets. Now, patience became essential. Ivo moved at his own pace. Some days he opened easily. Other days he stayed distant. Kyle learned to accept both without pressure. He waited. He waited for questions to surface. He waited for comfort to form. He waited for trust to settle without pushing it forward. This waiting felt different from avoidance. It required engagement rather than withdrawal. It required attention without control. Kyle struggled at first. He felt the urge to explain himself, to offer reassurance before it was needed. He resisted. Saren noticed that restraint. She watched how Kyle paused before responding, how he allowed silence to exist without filling it, how he learned to sit with discomfort rather than escape it. This patience extended beyond parenting. Kyle learned to move slower in all areas of life. He made decisions with more care. He spoke with less urgency. He allowed others to set pace. The change was subtle but deep. Patience taught him how to respect limits without resentment, how to accept that some things cannot be earned quickly, how to remain steady even when progress felt invisible. He learned that growth does not announce itself. It reveals itself over time. Ivo responded to this patience with ease. He stopped testing limits as often. He relaxed into routine. He trusted that Kyle would not disappear when things felt uncomfortable. Kyle recognized the difference between waiting out of fear and waiting out of care. This time, waiting built rather than destroyed. And through patience, Kyle began to understand the depth of what he had once avoided. Saren observed without interference. She did not reward consistency with praise. She did not test Kyle with obstacles. She watched patterns form and trusted time to reveal truth. She noticed how Kyle adjusted himself rather than asking others to adjust for him. She noticed how he respected routines without question. She noticed how he left when it was time to leave. That mattered. Saren had learned to trust behavior more than language. Kyle's behavior stayed aligned. He did not regress under stress. He did not disappear when patience was required. She allowed herself to acknowledge change without rushing emotion. Trust rebuilt slowly, shaped by repetition rather than hope. Saren felt no pressure to resolve the past. She focused on the present, on stability, on protecting what had been built with care. She noticed how tension left her body during Kyle's visits, how she no longer braced herself for disappointment, how her breath stayed even. These shifts arrived quietly. Saren did not interpret them as forgiveness. She saw them as data. Kyle's presence no longer disrupted peace. It supported it. That distinction mattered more than any apology ever could. Saren understood that growth through action carries more weight than growth through promise. She respected the patience Kyle showed, not because it impressed her, but because it honored boundaries. She allowed space for something new to form without naming it yet. Trust, she knew, does not rebuild through intention. It rebuilds through consistency, and consistency, for the first time, was no longer missing. Love did not return the way it once existed. There were no sweeping declarations, no sudden closeness, no attempt to recover what had been lost. What returned arrived quieter, steadier, and far more honest. Saren noticed it first in how she felt around Kyle. Her body no longer tensed when he arrived. Her thoughts no longer raced ahead, preparing for disappointment. She did not monitor his tone or measure his words. She simply observed his presence and let it speak for itself. Love began to return as respect. It lived in the way Kyle listened without interrupting, in how he accepted her decisions without negotiation, in how he showed care without expecting access in return. They spoke more openly now, not about rebuilding a marriage, but about values, about what they would not compromise again, about what stability meant for Ivo. Saren allowed herself to feel affection without fear. She did not rush it. She did not question it. She let it exist without forcing direction. Kyle felt the shift too. He no longer tried to define the relationship. He focused on honoring it. He stayed present without pushing outcome. That restraint changed everything. Love, this time, felt grounded. It did not ask Saren to shrink. It did not demand patience at the cost of voice. It did not survive on hope alone. It stood on clarity. They laughed again. Quiet moments returned. Shared understanding replaced careful distance. None of it erased memory. It acknowledged growth. Saren realized something important. Love does not return by repeating the past. It returns by respecting the lessons learned from it. This love knew its limits, and because of that, it felt safe. They did not pretend the past had not happened. There were no rewritten timelines, no softened truths. The years apart remained exactly what they were, real, shaping, permanent. Saren did not forget the silence. Kyle did not forget the cost of it. They spoke about the past without accusation, without defense, without urgency to resolve everything neatly. Some moments stayed painful. Some stayed unresolved. They accepted that. Saren made one thing clear early. "I won't live in a story where the past is dismissed," she said. "It shaped who we are now." Kyle agreed without hesitation. "I don't need it erased," he said. "I need it respected." That mattered. They acknowledged that Saren had built a life alone, that she had made decisions without backup, that her strength did not arrive because of suffering, but because of choice. Kyle did not minimize his absence. He did not frame it as misunderstanding. He named it as failure and allowed it to remain part of the story. They allowed space for grief, not loud, not consuming, honest. Some nights, Saren spoke about fear she once carried. Kyle listened without trying to soften it. Some mornings, Kyle shared regret without expecting reassurance. Healing did not mean erasing. It meant integrating. By allowing the past to stand untouched, they removed its power to repeat itself. They did not rush forgiveness. They let understanding lead. The past stayed where it belonged, behind them, informing every step forward without controlling it. Ivo gained a father not through declaration, but through reliability. Kyle did not announce his role. He earned it. He attended school events without seeking recognition. He helped with homework patiently. He learned how Ivo thought and adjusted accordingly. He listened more than he instructed. Trust formed quietly. Ivo began asking Kyle questions without prompting. He sought him out naturally. He expected him to be there. Kyle treated that expectation with care. He never promised what he could not keep. He showed up when expected. He stayed present even when moments felt awkward or uncertain. Ivo noticed. Children do. Ivo learned that his father did not disappear when things felt uncomfortable. that he did not retreat when questions grew difficult, that he stayed steady. Saren watched closely, protective without being restrictive. She saw how Kyle honored routines rather than disrupting them, how he accepted correction without resentment. She allowed space because space felt safe now. Ivo gained something essential, not wealth, not status, consistency. Kyle understood that fatherhood did not require perfection. It required presence that stayed. Over time, Ivo stopped asking if Kyle would come back. He assumed it. That assumption marked success. Through everything, Saren never lost herself again. She did not return to waiting. She did not soften boundaries to maintain peace. She did not trade voice for closeness. Her dignity remained intact because she protected it deliberately. She continued working, continued parenting with confidence, continued choosing routines that supported stability. She did not hand control of her life back to anyone. Kyle respected that. He did not ask her to compromise herself. He did not attempt to lead. He stood beside her as an equal. Saren allowed love without surrender. That distinction changed everything. She no longer feared being replaced by silence. She trusted herself to leave if necessary. That knowledge freed her to stay without fear. Dignity did not make her distant. It made her grounded. She modeled strength for Ivo without hardness. She showed him that love can exist alongside boundaries, that care does not require erasure. Saren understood now that walking away had not cost her love. It had preserved her ability to receive it fully later. She did not regret leaving. She respected herself for doing so, and that respect shaped every relationship that followed. Kyle earned trust the same way he rebuilt everything else, through action. He did not rush milestones. He did not assume progress. He stayed patient, knowing trust grows at its own pace. He honored boundaries without testing them. He stayed consistent even when no reward followed. He understood that trust cannot be negotiated. Saren felt the difference. She allowed closeness without fear. She trusted presence without monitoring. She felt safe enough to rest again. Kyle never forgot how close he came to losing everything that mattered. That memory kept him grounded. Trust, once earned, did not make him careless. It made him careful. This story does not end with perfection. It ends with alignment. Love shaped by clarity. Family built on presence. Power replaced by responsibility. Now, this is where the story turns to you. What lesson stood out to you the most? Was it the cost of silence? The strength of walking away? The patience required to rebuild trust? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value stories rooted in dignity, accountability, and real growth, subscribe to this channel and stay with us, because love, when done right, never asks you to disappear. It asks you to stand fully in who you are,